soon after the Rabwa railway incident, inflamed by the false and slanderous propaganda generated by the mullahs and tabloids of Pakistan, members of the Jamaat were subjected to barbaric atrocities. Pakistan became engulfed in a nationwide disturbances, which were being enacted out on a daily basis.
I have very specific memories, and two stand in my mind. One was that as the disturbances unfolded, which were in the cities, and I was a student in Lahore at that time, Islami Jamiyat-e-Talaba in the lead in terms of the street agitations. So they closed the educational institutions, which is usually a initial knee-jerk reaction when stuff happens. And I still have a good memory that taking the buses to go to Islamabad, where my parents lived there, and we had already started reading in the papers that these vigilantes were stopping buses and trains along any road and asking people to, recite the kalama and say whether you are a Aunt Ahmadis outside the pale of Islam, and if you say anything otherwise, they'll beat you up.
Riots started on 30th of May, and Ahmadis were attacked in many major towns and cities of Punjab. On the 1st of June, there were disturbances in 41 places. The whole of Punjab was engulfed in these disturbances. The biggest incident was that which took place in Gujranwala. Shops and houses of Ahmadis were burned to the ground. An Ahmadi, Muhammad Afzal Saab, and his son Muhammad Ashraf Saab were martyred in a most barbaric manner. First, the rioters disemboweled Muhammad Ashraf Saab, and then they smashed his head with bricks. When Ashraf asked for water, they filled his mouth with sand. After murdering the son, the crowd then turned to the father. They asked Muhammad Afzal Saab to abuse Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad. He replied, "Do you consider me weaker in faith to my son?" Upon this, they murdered him too. The same afternoon, Sayyid Ahmad Khan, Chaudhry Manzoor Ahmad, and Chaudhry Mahmood Ahmad were murdered by rioters. Qureshi Ahmad Ali Saab was also mercilessly killed on the same day.
That was, C.A. Rahman was the Amir of Gujranwala. And it was in Gujranwala that most of the martyrdoms took place.
दो घर थे वहाँ, एक चौधरी अब्दुर्रहमान का घर, एक उनके करीब था चौधरी ज़फ़रुल्लाह खान साहब का घर, जो चौधरी ज़फ़रुल्लाह खान साहब C.A. रहमान के बाद अमीर बने थे उनके। एक घर में औरतें जमा कर दी गई, एक घर में मर्द जमा कर दिए जमात के, सारे इकट्ठे हो गए थे वहाँ.
The situation arose that there was no peace, no safety for any Ahmadi anywhere in Gujranwala. So all the Ahmadi men, women and children, they gathered at their Amir's house.
तो फ़ोन आया है, मैंने उठाया, तो उन्होंने बताया कि इस तरह हम इकट्ठे हो गए हैं, मर्द एक घर में वो हैं और हालात बाहर हमला करने वाले लोग आए हुए हैं.
And how they were in imminent danger of all of them being killed. And he became quite emotional at that time.
मैंने सबसे इस तरह किया, तो उन्होंने बात करते हुए, मतलब मैं बता रहा था, साथ साथ सब कुछ फरमाते थे, वो मैं उनको कह देता था, फ़ोन मेरे पास था. तो आखिर पे उन्होंने कहा कि जी हज़रत साहब से अर्ज़ करो कि शायद ये मेरा आखिरी सलाम.
Maybe this is my last salam to you. And at that moment, I felt Hazur's a little worried and, of course, a little saddened. And then he encouraged him and said, "Wa alaikum salam."
वो मतलब उठे हैं, and he went in his bedroom. कुछ अरसे के बाद मेरा ख्याल 15-20 मिनट हो गए इससे ज़्यादा, सब तशरीफ़ लाए कि पता करो हालात ठीक हैं, कुछ नहीं होगा इंशाअल्लाह।
On the 11th of June, Fakhruddin Bhatti Saab was mercilessly killed in Ahmedabad. His body was mutilated, shot at, pelted with stones. Then his house was looted and put on fire. His body was then thrown in the fire, and the crowd continued throwing stones at him. On the 16th of June, many newspapers who were still silent on the Ahmadi murders and persecution gave prominent coverage to the demand of mullahs to boycott Ahmadis. Many Ahmadi neighborhoods in the country were practically under siege. Hired thugs were put on duty to harass Ahmadis if they ventured out to the shops. Even obtaining milk for babies and other rations had been made impossible. Doctors refused to treat Ahmadi patients, and pharmacies refused to sell them life-saving medication. Ahmadi businesses were shut down and mosques vandalized.
I'll give you one example. There was some trouble in Dhera, and the street in which mainly the houses of families were located, there were non-Ahmadi pickets at both ends. Neither the Ahmadis could go outside nor someone could go in. So we sent a van load of provisions with Khuddam and said, you have to deliver these provisions to the Ahmadis. It is your duty to find a way out. So they went on the back of the houses of Ahmadis and contacted those people who were living on their backside and managed to make way into the Ahmadi houses and deliver the provisions.
On the 2nd of July, Seti Maqbool Ahmed Saab was shot dead at his home. On the 16th of July, a group of 40 Ahmadis were visiting their jailed friends and relatives in Sargodha jail. The delegation was ambushed at the train station. 10 Ahmadis received gunshot wounds. Master Raja Ziauddin Arshad Sahib died a few weeks later of his wounds. 29 Ahmadis lost their lives in the riots. Pakistani press did not report these killings under the instructions given to them from their government. Many newspapers were happy to give voice to the mullahs by spreading the word of their nationwide social and economic boycott of Ahmadis, but none had the shame or courage to tell their readers the real face of their religious leaders. Countless other Ahmadis had to leave their homes and businesses in ruins. Many never returned to their hometowns after 1974. While such horrific and horrendous attacks were happening across the country, the National Assembly did not utter a single word of condemnation against it.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. As we just watched, Ahmadis were facing a period of heavy persecution, and the parliament was deliberating to further oppress the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. And we've seen last 3 shows, now the 4th show started in our extraordinary journey from democracy to extremism. In the previous episode, we discussed the conspiracies behind the 1974 in-camera proceedings of the National Assembly of Pakistan. Now, we will start exploring the actual content of those proceedings that have now been released. Like in the previous shows, we have again been joined by Mr. Mujibur Rahman, a senior lawyer who has an in-depth knowledge of the legal aspects of the issue at hand. Assalamu alaikum, Mr. Rahman.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Mr. Rahman, my first question is any parliament really competent to discuss about people's faith?
The simple answer is no. A plain, emphatic, unequivocal no. Parliament, by its nature, by its structure, by its constitution, is not competent to deal with religion. It is not an ecclesiastical body. It is a democratic body, represents all faiths, represents all shades of opinion. It has nothing to do with religion, and it has no competence, no jurisdiction to deal with religion. Simple as that.
So if the answer is no, then why did the Ahmadiyya Muslim community's delegates really respond to the jurisdiction, and they did go to the parliament and were asked questions?
I'll respond the question in 2 parts. Number 1, this question arises only with a hindsight.
Right.
Now that you have seen what has happened, you think they should not have gone. But you must remember that the head of the Ahmadiyya community, Hazrat Khalifatul Masih, his Salis, He was a leader of worldwide spiritual community. He was answerable to history. He was conscious of that. If he did not appear at that time, people would have said, you had an opportunity, you did not explain your position. So he was answerable to history, number one. Number two, he could not have known what was happening, what is going to happen. Number three, he wanted to avail that opportunity of making it clear to the countrymen that something terribly wrong is being done. And now when you read the proceedings, it becomes clear it is good that he appeared. Otherwise, people would have said they had no answer to our allegations. That is number one. The number two is he did not really submit to the jurisdiction.
Right.
He raised objection to the jurisdiction that the assembly should not do it. What was the basis of that objection is a different question. But he raised objection to the jurisdiction on 3 counts. United Nations Charter, Constitution of Pakistan, Quran and Sunnah. He raised those objections. And after raising those objections, he explained to the position of the Jamaat Ahmadiyya vis-a-vis all the questions which had been raised in the memorandum, in the resolution presented before the Assembly.
Well, of course, many would argue, why did the Ahmadiyya delegate appear before the court? And we've discussed this before the special committee, I beg your pardon, which comprised the entire House. So we have a short VT about this as to why they really attended those proceedings.
अब रही ये बात कि पेश क्यों हुए, क्या कमज़ोरी थी? अगर कमज़ोरी होती तो कभी भी पेश ना होते। एक बहादुर पहलवान जिसे कामिल यकीन हो कि मुझे सारी दुनिया भी सवाल करे और जरा कदा करे, मुझे नाकाम नहीं कर सकते, वही इस पेशकश को कबूल कर सकता है। हज़रत मिर्ज़ा नासिर अहमद साहब ने बुज़दिली का नहीं, बहादुरी का नमूना दिखाया है। आपने कहा जितने चाहो सवाल करो।
Readers of the 1974 in-camera proceedings will find that the members of parliaments were under the impression that the Ahmadiyya delegation chose to be subjected to this cross-examination. Fact is that the delegations had no option but give evidence due to the obscene and slanderous nature of the resolutions presented in the parliament. Shah Ahmad Noorani and Mufti Mahmud tabled the resolution on the 30th of June 1974, which clearly states that Ahmadis should be declared non-Muslims because they are a product of imperial forces whose sole purpose was to destroy the unity of Muslims and falsify Islam, hatching conspiracies against Islam and the Ummah while pretending to be Muslims, unanimously declared enemies of Islam by a 140-member organization of Rabita Alam-e-Islami. The Law Minister, after consulting with the Speaker and members of the opposition, formed a steering committee to obtain witness statements to decide the status of a person who does not believe that the Holy Prophet ﷺ was the last prophet. Jamaat Ahmadiyya was accused of denying the finality of the prophethood by both the opposition and the government. So the party being accused of the crime had to present the evidence voluntarily or otherwise. As a response to these resolutions, Nazir-e-Ala Sahibzada Mirza Mansoor Ahmad Sahib wrote to the Special Committee of National Assembly on the 4th of July. A delegation of the Ahmadiyya movement in Islam, comprising of the following members, may kindly be allowed to present material with regard to our belief in Khatm-e-Nubuwwat, finality of the prophethood of the Holy Prophet Muhammad, may peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, and to depose as witnesses Maulana Abul Atta, Sheikh Muhammad Ahmad Mazhar, Hazrat Mirza Tahir Ahmad, Maulana Dost Muhammad. The Secretary of National Assembly responded on the 8th of July. The Special Committee has permitted you to file a written statement of your views and produce documents in support. Thereof, the committee has also agreed to hear your delegation, provided it is headed by the chief of your Jamaat. Oral statement or speech will not be allowed, and only the written statement may be read before the committee. After hearing the statement and examining the documents, the committee will put question to the chief of the Jamaat. Please file your statement along with documents with the Secretary National Assembly by 6 p.m. on the 11th of July.
So now we've seen that the Parliament is not really competent to decide on people's faith. Was it challenged by the Ahmadiyya Muslim community's delegate, and what was the basis of the challenge that they put forward?
Now, I have stated the challenge. They challenge the jurisdiction. Now, it's a valid question, rightly put. What is the basis? We just can't raise an objection in the air. The basis was there in our memorandum, and the memorandum presented and read out before the full house by the head of the delegation, Hazrat Mirza Nasir Ahmad Saab.
Right.
The basis of that was, as I said, United Nations Charter and the Pakistan Constitution. And in the Pakistan Constitution, there were specific provisions, Article 20 and Article 8. I would like to read, and this question was raised by Attorney General in the Assembly. He said, sir, what is the basis of your objection? You say we can't do it, why can't we do it?
Right.
So his answer was Article 8. And I read Article 8.
Hazrat Mirza Nasir Ahmad Saab's
Hazrat Mirza
answer.
Nasir Ahmad's answer was Article 8. And I read subclause 2 of Article 8. The state shall not make any law which takes away or abridges rights so conferred, and any law made in contravention of this clause shall, to the extent of this contravention, be void. So the Parliament was debarred, clearly debarred from interfering with the fundamental rights. Article 20 provided the fundamental right. Article 8 said you cannot violate that. And the subclause 5 said the rights conferred by this chapter shall not be suspended except as expressly provided by this Constitution.
Right.
And in that, it is Article 233. In that also, the religious freedom could never be suspended, even in emergency. So that was the basis.
So that was actually the challenge and the basis of the challenge that Hazrat Mirza Nasir Ahmad did put forward. So what was the response by the Attorney General?
The response was again very strange. You see, the answer was so clear that Attorney General was confronted with a rock wall. He couldn't go through it now. So what did he say? He said, sir, yes, but can't we amend the Constitution? That amounted to an admission that in the present Constitution we can't do it. So why can't we amend the Constitution? That started a very interesting controversy. What are the limitations of powers to amend the Constitution? Mirza Nasir Ahmad Saab said, no, you can't even amend the Constitution because this supreme body has imposed limitation upon itself. It is supreme, no doubt. So that was the answer. And so Yahya Bakhtiar dealt with in a very, I should say, very unprofessional manner. He at once conceded that we can't do it.
So he was taken by surprise that Hazrat Nasir Ahmad Saab said that.
Yes, he was taken by surprise, and he almost conceded, all right, we can't do it, so we will amend the Constitution.
Right.
And we will amend the fundamental rights.
Very interesting.
But he did not realize what was in it. We will talk of it later if it is necessary.
Very interesting. Thank you very much.
Because, you know, if they amended the Constitution and took away Article 8, then all rights would go away. Right to property, right to liberty, right to life, everything would go away. He did not realize that.
Very interesting. Ahmadiyya Muslim community maintains the position that the most important document in response to the resolution by the Parliament was the Mahzarnama or memorandum.
वो माज़रनामा अगरचे और उलमा भी मुकर्रर थे, मगर अमलन तकरीबन तमाम तर मैंने अपने हाथ से लिखा है. मैंने ये उठाया था सवाल जमात की नुमाइंदगी में, और यही जमात का अक़ीदा है कि हर शख्स को अगरचे ये हक़ है कि दूसरे को गलत समझे. इस हक़ से कोई किसी को रोक नहीं सकता, मगर जो समझता है उसे दूसरे पर ठोंसे कि तुम भी अपने आप को गलत समझो, ये जायज़ नहीं है, ये नामाकूल बात है. मसलन एक शख्स किसी को कुत्ता कह देता है या पागल हो तो कुत्ता समझ भी सकता है, लेकिन फिर इसरार करे कि तुम भौंको, ये जायज़ नहीं. तो मैंने ये सवाल उठाया था कि आप लोग हमें गैर मुस्लिम कहते हैं, कहते रहें, मगर ये कैसे हक़ हो गया कि हम गैर मुस्लिम बन जाएं आपके कहने से, और कलमा तौहीद का इनकार कर बैठें, अपने आप को मुसलमान कहना छोड़ दें और गैर मुस्लिमों वाली ज़िंदगी इख्तियार करें. ये है वो दलील जो पेश करनी मकसूद थी, और मैं समझा था वाज़ेह हो गई, मगर मुझे लगता है कि पूरी तरह वाज़ेह नहीं हुई. मगर बाद में जो गुफ्तगू हुई उसमें ये बात वाज़ेह कर दी गई थी कि हम जिस तरह आपको ये हक़ है, और मुझे याद है मैंने पीरज़ादा साहब से तफसीली गुफ्तगू की इस बात पर. मैंने कहा आपको ये हक़ है कि नहीं शियों को, यानी अगर वो शिया हैं तो, कि वो सुन्नियों को गैर मुस्लिम या दायरा इस्लाम से बाहर समझें। अगर नहीं है तो इस्तेमाल क्यों किया गया? लेकिन उसके बावजूद कभी शियों ने गैर शिया मुसलमानों को कलमा पढ़ने के हक़ से महरूम नहीं किया, क्योंकि हम तुम्हें गैर मुस्लिम समझते हैं। नमाज पढ़ने के हक़ से महरूम नहीं किया, क्योंकि हम तुम्हें गैर मुस्लिम समझते हैं। तो ये दलील की तफसील है।
Mahzarnama, the memorandum, is an important historical document which was presented by the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat in 1974 to the Special Committee of the National Assembly of Pakistan. The purpose of this document was to establish that the members of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat are Muslims and to explain its basic tenets, as well as refute the baseless allegations levelled against it. Similarly, an impassioned warning was also put on record to the effect that this assembly might become instrumental in creating dissension among the ranks of the followers of the Holy Prophet Muhammad ﷺ by declaring Ahmadis to be non-Muslim, because this act would set such a wrong and horrible precedent which might engulf other sects in the future.
So now let us actually revisit the two questions of principle that the Jamaat outlined in this memorandum. The first one was, is any assembly per se entitled to deprive an individual of this basic right to exercise his free will to associate himself with the religion of his choice? And the second being, is any assembly per se entitled to decide by way of interference in the domain of faith and religion what it considers to be the religion of a community, sect, or individual? The Jamaat obviously responded in the negative. It stated that regardless of color, race, geographical, and national divisions, this is the fundamental right of every human being that whichever religion he decides to associate himself to, he can do so. As a matter of fact, the UN Charter of Rights and Section 20 of the Constitution of Pakistan values and guarantees this basic human right.
Now we talk to the historian Dr. Mirza Sultan Ahmad, who is also an author in history and has analysed the 1974 proceedings at length. Dr. Ahmad, Assalamu alaikum. We have just seen a short piece about the memorandum. Please tell us a little bit about the memorandum that the head of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community read at the House of Parliament.
It was 189 pages memorandum containing 12 chapters, which was presented to the National Assembly, and it contained, described Jamaat's beliefs about the key matters, and also addressed the allegations which were made against Jamaat-e-Ahmadiyya in the resolution that was moved by opposition in the National Assembly. But I think that the gist of the matter, the most important part of the memorandum, or that was called Mahzarnama in Urdu at that time, was it's in its first chapter. And it addressed the key point that whether National Assembly should proceed with these deliberations and legislation as were being done at that time or not. I quote the exact words from the memorandum, that is page 8 of the English translation. I quote, "In view of the foregoing, we submit respectfully but firmly that the National Assembly of Pakistan should desist from deliberating and legislating upon such matters as would be tantamount to the contravention of basic human rights. It would violate the United Nations Charter of Human Rights as well as the Constitution of Pakistan. And most serious of all, it clearly runs counter to the teachings of the Holy Quran and the ahadith of the Holy Prophet ﷺ, and can prove to be a harbinger of many ills and disorders in the society. Moreover, this trend-setting action of the National Assembly of Pakistan can cause severe problems for religious minorities and denominations living in other countries, I unquote. So this is the most important, that clearly presented Jamaat-e-Ahmadiyya's point of view, that it is not for a national assembly or any political assembly or parliament of the world to even deliberate, leave alone passing law in such matters as were being done at that time, that who is Muslim and who is not a Muslim, or who belongs to this religion and who belongs to that religion. That is not the work of the parliament.
Mr. Rahman, the second point that was raised in memorandum was, even if we assume jurisdiction, the parliament can deliberate on people's faith, then it should be in the light of the Holy Quran and the Sunnah. How was that presented by Hazrat Mirza Nasir Ahmad?
Hazrat Mirza Nasir Ahmad Sahab presented that proposition in a very succinct and clear form, and he in fact left no room for them to escape. He split the question into a number of questions. He said, first of all, if you are going to define who the Muslim is, you have to find out, is there a definition given by Quran and the Holy Prophet ﷺ himself?
Right.
And was that definition followed in the subsequent times after him? Number two, if there is a definition provided by the Holy Quran and the Holy Prophet ﷺ, what that definition is. And he provided answers to that also. And then again, if there is a definition provided by Quran and Sunnah, then who has the authority to overrule Quran and Sunnah today in any parliament, anywhere in the world? That was a square question. How can you overrule? Either you say there is no definition provided by Quran and Sunnah, so we are free to define. If Quran and Sunnah has given a definition, you are not free to define. That is what Quran and Sunnah says.
So, Mr. Rahman, the memorandum was in response to the resolution that was tabled on 30th June in the Parliament. Did memorandum answer all the questions?
It answered all the questions raised in the resolution, and it dealt with the question raised in the motion moved by the government. Right. There were two things. Yes. One was a motion by the government, the other was a resolution by the opposition. Yes. The motion by the government required deliberation and discussion on a particular issue of finality of prophethood of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Resolution did not require any discussion. It simply stated, for these stated reasons, they should be declared non-Muslim. And all those reasons were squarely met in the memorandum. None of them were left out.
Right. Mr. Rahman, what was the reason and significance of leaving out memorandum from the actual published proceedings?
You see, the fact that the proceedings have been published, I should say reluctantly, on the orders of the High Court, indicates that people at the helm of the affairs did not like to disclose the whole proceedings.
Right.
It went against them through and through. Even so, when they were forced to publish the proceedings, when the veil of secrecy was lifted, something was still held behind. And that was the memorandum. And it was a foolish thing to do. Because even if they did not publish the memorandum, they cannot at any point of time plead that there was no memorandum. Because the memorandum is discussed again and again and again during the proceedings. Yes. Now, the reason why they did it, again foolishly, they have given it a one-sided picture now. They thought we have grilled Mirza Nasir Ahmad Sahib without telling the world at large what Mirza Nasir Ahmad Sahib had said in the assembly. You shut out the viewpoint of one party altogether. How can he call it a fair proceeding? And then again, when the proceeding starts, if you look at the proceedings on the 5th July starts with
5th August, you mean?
5th August 1974 starts with the cross-examination of the head of the Ahmadi delegation. Right. Cross-examination is over examination-in-chief. And that word, examination-in-chief, has been referred by the chairman of the assembly during proceedings, that all members have got the examination-in-chief. We will provide you the copies of cross-examination. So examination-in-chief is withheld. So how can anyone understand what happened? So Actually, they have tried to defraud the entire nation by withholding this, and there's a reason. By bare reading of the memorandum, you would reach at a conclusion that there is no cross-examination required. And in fact, they did not cross-examine him on the memorandum at all.
And I think it's highly recommended for all the audience to read for themselves. That's on islam.org. Yes. Turning our attention now to Dr. Ahmed again. Dr. Ahmed, on the first day of the proceedings, a detailed discussion we know took place on the topic of basic human rights. There was a huge disparity between the opinions of the Ahmadiyya delegation and that of the Attorney General. Give us a brief summary of that discussion, please.
It occurred on the first day, that is 5th August 1974. Attorney General of Pakistan quoted Hazur's Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Salih's Friday sermon, in which he quoted Constitution of Pakistan, Chapter 2, Section 20, which describes the religious freedom in Pakistan. And the clause says that every citizen shall have the right to profess, practice and propagate his religion. That was the main point. Now, Attorney General of Pakistan quoted Hazur's Friday sermon, that part of the Friday sermon, and said that there are words before this clause that subject to law, public order and morality. The point he was going to make is that the legislature or National Assembly of Pakistan or Parliament has got right to put restrictions on the basic human rights. For example, religious freedom, to right to profess, practice and propagate the religion. Because there are words before that are subject to law, public order and morality. So he was trying to make point that if we make this amendment in the Constitution, or if we pass law which put restriction on the basic human rights, especially religious freedom, then we can curtail religious freedom in Pakistan. The point of view presented by Hazur was that these are inalienable rights. No parliament, no legislature has got right to violate these rights, even if with majority.
Let's talk quickly about the Article 20 of Constitution. It uses three words: profess, practice and propagation. What is the difference between professing and practicing?
Before I go to that, taking a cue from what Mr. Ahmed has said just now, Attorney General was visibly shifting his positions. At the very first instance, he said, all right, if we can't do it, we will amend the Constitution. Means conceding that under the constitutional framework we cannot do. Then he takes another position. Even if we don't amend the Constitution, under the constitutional framework, we can take away your rights because the rights are, after all, not so absolute. They are subject to law and reasonable restriction in the interest of public order and morality. So he is shifting his position. From amendment, he comes to working within the constitutional framework. Now, subject to law, he rubbed it very much during the assembly. It is subject to law, there are restrictions, and that question had been decided long before by the Pakistan Supreme Court, way back in 1957, in the famous case known as Jibindara Kashore versus the province of East Pakistan. And the Supreme Court had said, I will read two sentences from there, what is subject to law. Does it mean that we can make a law and take away the rights? That is what Attorney General was saying. And the Supreme Court said, the very conception of the fundamental right is that it being a right guaranteed by the Constitution cannot be taken away by the law. And it is not only technically inartistic, but a fraud on the citizens for the makers of a constitution to say that a right is fundamental, but that it may be taken away by law. He knew this.
So he was actually overriding Supreme Court's decision.
He had cited this judgment in many cases, which he argued before the Supreme Court. He knew this judgment. And knowing this, he was arguing that subject to law means that we can make a law and take away our right.
Was he slightly forgetful, or was he being slightly dishonest?
I think he was not being honest at all.
Right.
But then the question which you put me was, that was the difference between practice and profess and practice. You see, Yahya Bakhtiar had, and as you said, profess means to claim to belong to a religion, to declare one's faith, to, by the word of mouth, lip profession as they say, by the word of mouth to declare that I belong to so and so faith, and to adopt a faith, to say that I adopt this faith, and by his cultural behavior he professes to be a Hindu or a Sikh or whatever. That is professing his faith in the ordinary day-to-day life. But when you talk of giving a declaration at one point of time, declare your faith. A person may declare his faith rightly or wrongly. He is a Muslim, but for some fear or for some material gain, he has given those material gains. For some material gain, he, knowingly that he is not a Christian, he says, I am a Christian. That is a false declaration. That is not a profession of faith. Giving a false declaration is distinctly different from professing a faith. The man who is giving that declaration in his ordinary day-to-day life, in his cultured behavior, and whenever he is otherwise asked to state a religion, he will say, I am a Muslim.
Yeah. Mr. Rahman, in those proceedings, the Attorney General actually referred to some very interesting examples, even compared trademark laws with religion, and also, so is it really true that a religion could be, is it correct to do that you can compare the religion with trademark laws? Can religion be monopolized?
Religion cannot be monopolized and religion cannot be compared to trademark laws, because trademark laws, they deal with tangible property rights. Property rights. Trademarks are tradable commodity, merchandise. It amounts to reducing and degrading religion to bring it down to the, as if religion was something worth selling and purchasing. Quran has used very derogatory words for the people who sell their faith for some benefit. So it is not a purchasable commodity. So therefore there is no comparison between trademark law and the, but there are other niceties also. Some people say, all right, but words and expressions are sometimes property, intellectual property they say. It's not a tangible property, but intellectual property. So intellectual property is preserved for a person who is the originator. So it was God.
Right.
So, and then it has to be registered. Look here, I am doing it for the first time, get it registered, nobody else will do it, henceforward. Who registered Islam with whom, with what authority, with what trademark authority in the government of Pakistan or anywhere else. So it was ridiculous altogether. But then he was doing something else also. He was relying on placing restrictions. He was referring to Mormons, multiple or polygamy and multiple marriages. He was referring to cow slaughter in India, restrictions being placed by. But all the time he was ignoring that all these cases did not place restriction on profession of religion. It was a restriction on the practice.
Yes.
Practice also cannot be curtailed. It can be regulated. In our cases in Pakistan, Shia processions are regulated. You go through this route, don't go through this.
We can't stop them altogether.
This is laid down by our law. You can't stop them all. You can regulate.
Mr. Rahman, moving forward, also in those proceedings, Mr. Bakhtiar actually has mentioned, the Attorney General, he's mentioned preamble, and he says preamble actually can override constitution. Please tell us, what is preamble? And also, I think we've discussed anyway in the previous shows, but just to remind our viewers, what is preamble? And secondly, what is the position of the contemporary world constitutions? Does preamble override constitution?
Well, the simple answer is the preamble never overrides any statute. Preamble is there in the beginning of every statute. It gives out the reason and purpose why the law is being made. So, but preamble is never a part of the statute. So, in the case of Pakistan Constitution, preamble was initially adopted as an objective resolution, separately adopted as an objective resolution.
In 1949.
These are our objectives which we want to achieve. And you know, there was a time gap between objective resolution and the Constitution. But objective resolution gave the objectives which we were trying to achieve. And those objective resolution was not a part of the Constitution. It was made a part of the preamble of the Constitution. So the Constitution was, in fact, the enactment of our intentions which are in the Constitution. And preamble was not an enforceable part of the Constitution. Supreme Court had laid it down, and it had been settled in the parliamentary debates at the time of passing the 1973 Constitution.
Also, in the light of this, please expound on Hazrat Mirza Nasir Ahmed discussing about making exception rule. What was the background to that?
You see, Yahya Bakhtiar was trying to say that fundamental rights, after all, you see, I might perhaps include here that the courts have always held that faith cannot be regulated, faith cannot be interrupted, faith cannot be restricted.
So it cannot be regulated?
Faith cannot be regulated.
Right.
Practice.
Okay.
Faith is in the mind.
Right.
So, and Yahya Bakhtiar, in so many words during his cross-examination, in his own words, I do not have the proceedings here, in his own words said, sir, we cannot deal with the human mind, so we cannot interfere. There I agree, because it's a matter of mind. But when it comes to practice then we can interfere.
Yeah.
So he was trying to say that the practice can be interfered. But in practice, I have said, practice can only be regulated. And your question now is, what?
So basically, also, as Salis Rahimahullah Ta'ala, the third successor of the Prophet Messiah, he did discuss about making exception rule.
So Yahya Bakhtiar was arguing that, look here is an exception we are going to make. So Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Salis, Hazrat Mirza Nasir Ahmad Sahib, time and again said, look here, exception is not a rule. Rule is Article 20. When you make an exception, you make an exception, and he was trying to make exception as a law. Exception, Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Salis time again said, there is a famous saying, exception always proves the rule. And whenever he gave an example, he said, this is an extreme example of one man. One man is trying to get admission in the college, medical college.
But you can't generalize that.
You can't generalize that. And this is a well-known thing. There is exceptions are exceptions. When you make it into a law, you can't make it, if you make a law, that is different. But when you are trying to make an exception of the law, you cannot generalize it. That is what he was trying to say.
Thank you very much. The Parliament was, of course, discussing the issue of declaring Ahmadis non-Muslims, but was it something unusual to pass an edict against someone, excommunicating them all outside the pale of Islam? Are Ahmadis the first and the last victims?
A fatwa in the Islamic faith is the technical term for the legal judgment that a qualified jurist can give on issues pertaining to the Islamic law. In the early days of Islam, fatwas were pronounced by distinguished scholars to provide guidance to other scholars, judges, and citizens on how subtle points of Islamic law should be understood, interpreted, or applied. As the sun of spiritual guidance, however, set upon the Muslims, and the mantle of darkness spread upon them, mullahs became the self-proclaimed representatives of Islam. They began issuing edicts against everything and everyone, from Muhammad Ali Jinnah to Pakistan, from Mickey Mouse to football, and gradually turned into living fatwa machines. In this course, they have not even shied away from passing edicts of disbelief against their own fellow Muslim brothers. Here are some examples. Some of the top-ranking non-Ahmadi religious scholars hold the following view about Deobandis.
Deobandis are decisively apostates and disbelievers. Their apostasy has degenerated to such a great degree of utmost disbelief that if someone were to even slightly doubt the apostasy and disbelief of these apostates and disbelievers, then he himself qualifies as an apostate and a disbeliever.
Barelvi Imams have warned us in unequivocal terms about the Ahl Hadith sect that
the Wahhabis, the contemporary Muqalladeen, are disbelievers and apostates by the consensus of the scholars of Mecca and Medina of such a degree that after being opposed of their accursed statements, if someone still does not consider them to be disbelievers, or even if he as much as doubts it, then he himself is a disbeliever.
The Deobandi scholars remind us of the following injunction of the Islamic law against any follower of the Barelvi sect.
Such a person is undoubtedly a disbeliever. His prayer leadership, social interaction with him, treating him with love and affection, all these acts are unlawful.
Finally, about the Shia, the scholars of the generality of Muslims have warned us in the following words.
The definitive, unequivocal degree by general consensus against these Shias is that these are in general disbelievers and apostates. Social interaction or offering customary salutations to any of their men or women, scholar or ignorant, is an unlawful act by the highest order.
And there are countless more.
The Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat views such edicts as nothing more than strongly held opinions of some religious scholars. These edicts are nothing new. The difference is that for the first time in the history of modern democracy, an elected parliament joined hands with the clergy to declare a sect out of the fold of Islam. The leader of the opposition, Mufti Mahmud, who was one of the central characters in declaring Ahmadis non-Muslims, issued the following edict.
Maududi is one who has gone astray, who is an infidel, and outside in the pale of Islam. It is illegitimate for anyone to pray behind him or behind any Maulvi who belongs to his group.
Now, we ask the mullahs, such as Mufti Mahmud, who, with the support of the government of Pakistan, declared Ahmadis non-Muslims, the following question. As per the above-mentioned edict issued by him, the whole of Jamaat-e-Islami had become non-Muslim, but why were they not taken to the parliament by the same Mufti Mahmud in order to declare them non-Muslims?
So that was definitely not the first time that they were passing edicts against the Ahmadis, but in the history of Islam, it was surely the first time that somebody was being taken to the parliament and their decision was being made about people's faith. In the next episode, we will carry on exploring and delving further into the extraordinary proceedings of the National Assembly of Pakistan in 1974. For the time being, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ye dua hi katha mujza ke asa sahiro ke muqabil bana